In the struggle for the Messines Ridge, farmsteads, villages, churches and chapels disappeared in an inferno of fire and explosions. In the aftermath of the battle, a young artist who was also a German soldier made a painting of a ruined chapel and sent it home as a souvenir. His name was Adolf Hitler. Hitler's other souvenir was an award for bravery. He won the Iron Cross on this spot, crawling out under fire to rescue his wounded captain. Captain Hoffmann did not survive his encounter with the ladies from hell. Unfortunately for posterity, Hitler did. The Scots heard of their nickname from German prisoners and took it as a compliment to themselves and to the kilt. No amount of scoffing would convince them that the kilt was not the ideal garment for a fighting man. Hey, Jock, are you no called with a kilt? No, I'm kilt with a cold. Ha, ha. The winter for the British was more than a respite. It was a reprieve. There was time to build up the depleted army, time to plan the offensives which would enable the Allies to push ahead in the spring, time for the Australians and the New Zealanders and the Canadians to get to the war. In April, the Canadians arrived in Flanders, where a mishmash of French and British soldiers were holding the line around Ypres. They arrived in time for the spring offensive, but it was the Germans who made it. This time, they had a secret weapon. It was poison gas. It happened near here, and they still call the place Vancouver Crossroads in honor of the Canadians who saved the day.
A Canadian came down, and he shouted to our captain, "The bastards have broken through, so give them the bloody bayonet joke." So then the order came, fix bayonets. Of course, our hands were shaking, fixing the bayonets. But the strange thing was that when you'd got your bayonet fixed and you got your order to charge, your fear and trembling all seemed to go. Your main concentration was to get there and not get killed yourself. Then, of course, there was all the chaps lying about wounded and crying. That was heart-rending, that was, all night long. I was set in front maybe about 50 yards to lie there and watch for the Jerrys in case they made a sudden counter-attack. You were supposed to fire a few shots and warn the blokes behind.
And the shells, they're not just bits of metal, they're hot metal, flying all over the place. And there are machine guns going and pandemonium all round. How the devil did you get out of that unscathed? How did you get out? It's a miracle.
The miracle was that the Germans had not marched straight into Ypres, because it had been touch and go. It was the start of 5 weeks' furious fighting. By the end of it, the line had been pushed back and the salient was reduced to a tight little circle round the smoking ruins of Ypres. It had cost 60,000 casualties to defend it.
I have a heart that's broken, that's broken, that's broken. I have a heart that's broken in twa. But I get to tell a soldier, a soldier, a soldier. I get to tell a soldier before he get a war.
One Highland sergeant summed it up in a letter home. Our sons will call it Ypres. Well may they call it Ypres. In far-off Argyllshire, the point was readily taken. Ypres is also the Gaelic for sacrifice. Ypres had ceased to become a legend. Now it was almost a holy cause, and the salient around it was to be the anvil upon which the courage and the will of 1,000,000 soldiers would be hammered out and tested to the limit.
Somewhere to the left of Hellfire Corner, we plunge into a ditch appropriately known as Muddy Lane. It's long ago lost all resemblance to a trench. The sides are liquid mud. The bottom is watery slush, and the muddy water reaches up to our knees. We were here only a week ago, but these mud heaps disintegrate so quickly we can't recognize them. We finally discover company headquarters, and the dugout seems to be a foot or so deeper in the water than it was before.
At some point in history, the Flanders plain lay under the sea. It is reclaimed bogland. When the guns started up and the shells poured down to shatter the drainage ditches, the land turned into a quagmire.
In this blessed place we are to live, if we can, for 48 hours. Our turn is short, because it's almost impossible to get any sleep. We prop ourselves against the muddy sides of our ditch and try to keep our rifles clean. It's impossible to drain away the water. And the Hun, who is as usual up the hill, has been draining his water into our line for a long time past.
Under the weight of the snaking miles of trenches that carved the land into a jigsaw of crazy pieces, under the weight of incessant bombardments, under the weight of 1,000,000 men, as battalion after battalion slipped and slithered and floundered through the mud, the land itself gave up the ghost. Farms and fields, woods and villages sank into an anonymous morass.
The suction was forever pulling you down. In a way, it was worse when the mud didn't suck you down. When it yielded under your feet, you knew it was a body you were treading on. You'd tread in one and it would grunt all the air out of its body and made your hair stand on end.
You're really an animal. The unfortunate thing is you think now and again. And your main thoughts are, when am I going to get a blighty and get back out of it?
The casualties incurred in merely holding the line were, on average, 7,000 men a month, killed and wounded. The army called it normal wastage.
Far, far from Ypres, I long to be, where German snipers can't get at me. Cold is my dugout, damp are my feet, waiting for whiz-bangs to send me to sleep.
But the war could not be won by waiting any more than it could be won by sitting still. And by 1917, the army had been more or less sitting still in the salient for 2 years, while great battles had been fought elsewhere. In the summer of 1916, elsewhere had been 50 miles to the south of Ypres, and the battle had been the Battle of the Somme. It had put paid to the flower of Kitchener's army. In a memorandum to the cabinet, Lord Lansdowne summed up a growing feeling of unease. Are we to continue until we have killed all our young men? But the commander-in-chief, Sir Douglas Haig, was anxious to deal the Germans a body blow where it would hurt the most. That place, he firmly believed, would be in the north, at Ypres. Shipping losses were considerable, and intelligence reports suggested that this was entirely due to the fact that German submarines were operating out of the Belgian ports of Ostend and Zeebrugge. If the ports could be captured, it would do more than safeguard vital shipping and supplies. It would break the stalemate of the trenches. But although Ostend and Zeebrugge lay just a few tantalizing miles up the coast, it was impossible to reach them. The land to the north had been flooded in 1914 to stem the German advance, and an impassable swamp divided the opposing armies. The only way was forward. Break out of the salient, advance a few miles and swing the guns northwards to attack the ports from the rear. At the same time, in cooperation with the Navy, there would be an amphibious attack from the sea. In the middle of June, Haig travelled to London to put his final plans before the War Cabinet. He was in for a nasty surprise. It was the 171st day of the 3rd year of the war, and the mood had changed. There had been too many tales of the bloodbath at the front, too many men returning shattered in mind and body, too many long casualty lists, too many bereavements, too little progress, too few victories, and too little hope of a speedy end to the war and all its horrors.
If you want the old battalion, I know where it is. I know where it is. I know where it is. If you want the old battalion, I
The Prime Minister put it succinctly. How can the War Cabinet gamble with lives merely because those who are directing the war can think of nothing else to do with the men under their command?
I saw them hanging on the old barbed wire.
But the First Sea Lord was in favour of the plan. So many ships were being sunk that unless Ostend and Zeebrugge could be captured, the war, he claimed, could simply not continue. That clinched it. Reluctantly but unanimously, the War Cabinet gave the Commander-in-Chief permission to proceed with his preparations.
If I were old, or only 70, then should I be a great man in his prime. I should rule army corps. At my command, men would rise up, salute me, and attack, and die. I'd send my grandsons out to France and wish I'd got 10 other ones to send. One cannot sacrifice too much, I'd say. Then would I make a noble, toothless speech, and all the listening Parliament would cheer. We cannot and we will not end this war till all the younger men with martial mien have entered capitals. Never make peace till they are cripples on one leg or dead.
On the roads of France, the troops were on the move, marching towards Flanders and towards the battle. As far away as London, in the quiet hours of the night, it was just possible to hear a rumbling sound, like thunder in the far distance. It was the sound of the guns, 130 miles away. Standing wheel to wheel in Flanders, they were firing the bombardment that would ring up the curtain on the battle and usher the infantry over the top.
Oh, Lord, let me be 90 yet, I pray. Methuselah was quite a youngster when he died. Now, vainly weeping, we should say, another great man perished in his prime. Oh, let me govern, Lord, at 99.
Glove Story, A Taste of Tonight, from Cadbury's. Release the blonde from the Black Tower.
The Remington microscreen shaves as close as a blade or your money back. The first microscreen shaves incredibly close. The second even closer. Shaves as close as a blade or your money back.
At 10 minutes to 4, on the morning of the 31st of July 1917, the troops attacked and burst out of the salient. It was like a sunburst after the grey gloom of 2 years of stalemate.
We moved up to the canal bank in the dark, ready to go off at 3:50. Just before we moved off, my two friends were killed. Jock Gillett and another chap. They were just up on the top, watching through binoculars, and a big shell came across and killed the one, and the other got an arm blown off. Jock Gillett. Jock was put into an ambulance, and then all of them were blown to bits in the ambulance.